Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective. This is the second topic week of April 2018. This week's topic comes from our very own Yucca, who asked simply, do we garden, and is gardening important in our practice? So, first question, easy to answer. Yes, I do. I do garden. Those of you who have been watching my videos for years probably know that I have not lived in a place with an actual yard and traditional place to garden for a long time. I've not had a yard for years. I instead keep potted plants. And my two favorites both happen to be herbs that are known for spreading like crazy. I don't know if they're actually considered invasive species. They probably are though, because they'll just spread and spread and spread, which I love because I love using a lot of them, so I keep them in nice big pots. But one of them is the chamomile plant that I inherited from my mother because we had it in a nice big pot on our back porch at our old house, where we did actually have a yard and a garden, but we still kept potted plants, so who knows. And it was next to another large potted plant, and the chamomile spread over into it because they were very close, and so it just kind of took over this other pot. So I ended up with one of them, and my mom had the other one. I still have it. Right now it has not come back up for the springtime yet. It actually was snowing here in Ohio, in Cleveland, this past week. So it's not yet fully springtime enough for all the plants to come up. We're starting to see some of the early crocuses. I saw one yard while I was walking the other day that had hyacinths already blooming, but none of my plants that are in the pots have come back up yet. So right now they are all just dark soil and dead stems and leaves from the last season. The other thing that is my favorite plant that I have potted is mint. And it's actually mint from my grandmother's house where I grew up. That there, now it grows wild. I don't know who originally planted it there, if anyone originally planted it there, or if it was always just wild, but it grows all over the hill where I grew up. So a few years ago, I took a bunch of it with the roots and potted it so that I can have mint from my grandma's house with me wherever I go. And mint and chamomile both are very resilient, hardy plants to be growing up here, at least in my climate. And so even when they dry up a little bit at a time, depending on the weather or whatever, they might dry up and go dormant for a little bit. They come back multiple times, and they always come back year after year. The other things that I plant, I have had success growing peppers in pots. I've never grown tomatoes or anything like that because I'm actually not a huge fan of tomatoes. I like tomatoes diced in certain dishes, but it's a texture thing for me. I've just never been a huge fan of tomatoes, so I've never grown them myself, although this year my partner and I might be, because we make a lot of salsas and things like that. And so peppers, for sure, I've always had good luck growing sweet peppers and banana peppers in pots. And I also always try to, but I've never been on top of the planting season, so it's very hard for me to grow herbs from seeds because I don't plant them in time. So this year I'm really trying to be on top of it, and I always attempt to grow lavender, rosemary, basil, thyme, lemon thyme, if I specifically have those seeds. This year I have a lot of mixed wildflower seeds that I'd love to put in a little planter. And yeah, so I do my gardening in pots. The second part of the question, is it important to our practice, right? This is maybe slightly a different thing. So I had to think about this. And I challenged myself to try to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is gardening to my practice. And my initial thought was 6, because it's definitely something that I enjoy doing, and connecting with plant life and having that physical connection to the elements of earth and water specifically in the process of gardening is something that is an important connection in my practice. So I thought, okay, well, it's got to be on the upper side of importance. It's definitely above a 5. So I was like, well, like 6 or 7. Because I pretty much never rate anything all the way at a 10, right? I reserve the extreme. That's always just been a thing that I do. And I wouldn't call it a 9 because it's not the most important thing in my practice. Gardening is not what my overall practice centers itself around. So I was thinking 6 or 7. But I would really place it more like a 7 or an 8 after thinking about it for a little while, because while it is not what my entire practice centers and focuses itself around, it is something that, were it taken away from me, would really negatively affect my practice and the way that I connect with the land and with the elements of earth and water specifically. There would be other ways that I could do that, definitely, but yeah, having my own little garden and learning more about the plants through that process, having to care for them, and then also when I grow things that I use in food or in tea, because I mean I do use the mint and the chamomile, and all of that is used, I use it in tea for myself. All of those things are important for me to have, knowing that I can provide something like that for myself from the earth through my connection to it, rather than just going out and buying a box of chamomile tea all the time. I know that all throughout, 3/4 of the year, when my chamomile is blooming, that I have chamomile to harvest. And, I mean, really, I have it all year round if I just use that, because I always harvest way more than I use at any given time, because I don't drink it, like, every single day. But in the same with the mint, right? Knowing that I could, if I wanted to, only use that all year round, and I would be sustaining my own use of these specific herbs, which is why I would also love to get on top of growing these other herbs in pots, right? And I can buy them as plants, but I already have a collection of many, many seeds that I just need to schedule myself better. I've just always been bad at thinking about planting until it's too late. It's too late for the planting season. And I try it anyway, darn it. I try it every year, and I get tiny little plants started, but there's never enough time for them to just grow up and mature to the point where they can sustain themselves from, through the rest of the year. So yeah, so I do garden, and while it is not the most important thing in my practice, it is something that's pretty important to me, and I had never thought of it as such until I challenged myself to come up with a number. So I think I would call it somewhere around an 8, somewhere around a 7 or an 8, specifically because of the fact that if it were going to be like you're stranded on a desert island and you can only have 2 hobbies kind of thing, if someone said you're not allowed to garden anymore, you're not allowed to grow your herbs and your little plants in pots, that, I would be really upset by that. I would be missing something from my day-to-day connections if that were to happen. So I didn't think of gardening as being that important to my practice. But when you think of it that way, you start to see it a little differently. So I encourage all of you to think about things in that way. If it's not gardening, maybe your crystals. A lot of us love crystals. Well, how important would you say they are in your practice? On a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being they're not at all important, and 10 being they are the entire focus of my practice. I could not possibly live without them. Where would you rate crystals? Where would you rate your favorite types of incense? Where would you rate gardening and the herbs that you use? Stuff like that. So that was pretty interesting. Thank you, Yucca. And when spring actually does roll around here for reals and my potted plants start sprouting again and blooming, I will share that on social media. I'll keep you up to date. I wish that I had them to show now, but I don't. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. And until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.